All right, let's talk about color. When we talk about color, we have to differentiate between the color we use on websites, which is the color that gets displayed on our screens, and the color that you use when you paint or use ink of some kind, right? Paints, prints use subtractive color. To get white, they use no color at all. To get black, use all color. If you take all the paints and mix them all together, you get something dark and close to black. In a perfect world, you'd get black. But that's not what we're doing, right? We're working on the web. We're working with screens. We're working with projected light, right? That uses what's called additive color. To get white, we use all the color. To get black, we use no color. In other words, when your monitor is turned off and there's no light there, it's black. And if you put all the color together, it would be white. We can describe colors in different ways. First of all, you've seen in your text, you can describe them with words like red and purple or lemon chiffon. And we can actually use those in CSS and they work, right? Not all colored words work, just the ones that are already programmed in. But we don't really tend to use those in the real world that much because you probably don't want red. You probably want exactly this kind of red, right? In fact, you probably don't even really want lemon chiffon. You may like lemon chiffon, but you may want it to be a little bit lighter, or a little bit darker, or slightly different. So we tend to use much more specific ways of describing color to say exactly what color we want. And the two most common ones are RGB and hex. So RGB is red, green, blue, and hex is hexadecimal. Okay. And this is a note that says that CSS3 added transparent as an option for color also. Yes, it is. Okay. So how does RGB color work? You've probably seen some of these codes already. You have, I know you have. And you even worked with them a little bit in the past or typed them in, right? Now it's time to really use them. So you really need to know how they work. RGB color, how it works. RGB color values is a scale of 0 to 255. You could use percents instead, but look at the percents. They go from 0 to 100, right? So 0 to 255 gives you more detail, gives you more accuracy to get exactly what you want. So we tend to write it with those numbers from 0 to 255. So if we make this paragraph a color, and when we write RGB and then put parentheses, and this is one of the first and few times where we actually use parentheses in a CSS code. We don't tend to use parentheses very much for things. And we did 200 and 178 and 230 RGB. That's 200 red, 178 green, 230 blue. It would be percentage-wise, it'd be 78, 70, and 90, about the same thing. And what would we get? If we put those numbers together, this is what we would get, a pleasant lavender, okay? If we did 0, 0, and 0, we would get black. If we did 255, 255, 255, we would get white, right there. And if we did 128, which is half, right? 128, 128, 128, we would get a gray color where they intersect there. See how that works? That's how RGB works, red, green, blue. In hex, we also use red, green, blue, right? But we use it in another system that still comes out to be 255. So it's just another way of doing it, that's all. Hex values are preceded by a hashtag, okay? Although they're not case sensitive, for our class, our rule is that they are written uppercase because they involve letters and numbers and it's easier to read as uppercase. It would work upper or lower, but in general, we should write them as uppercase. Okay, and this is how you write them. Oh, look I forgot my semicolon there. That's terrible. We still need the colon. We still need the semicolon. The hex code is the hex and then 6 numbers. Even though some are letters, they're actually numbers. In this example, this means what is this color? It's C8 red. It's B2 green, and it's E6 blue. How much is E6? What is this, bingo? This will make more sense in just a minute. Or some sense, anyway. Hex is a 16-base system. where 00 is the lowest number, and it means no color. And FF is the highest number, and it means 255 or 100% of color, right? So if we wanted to write black in hex, we would write hashtag 0000. And if we want to write white, we would write hashtag FFFFF, right? When we have duplicated numbers, as we sometimes do, we can just write them as 3 instead of 6. So this is the same as this, and this FFF, 3Fs is the same as 6Fs. Okay. But what does this mean, 16-base system, and how can F be a number? Rather than have me explain it, I'm going to play this video. Now, I'm going to play with the volume turned up. Hopefully you can hear it. But sometimes playing a video through a video creates some problems. And maybe you won't be able to hear it that well. Okay, just go to this link. You can find this presentation, remember, on Moodle. Go to this link and then watch it yourself, and then pick up with the presentation after I finish with the video.
Hi friends, I just wanted to show you this table that I made for converting between base 10 and base 16. This is actually more about counting, okay? So this column is how we normally count, right? That's base 10. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and so on. And here we notice that we're not going to have 10 until we've got 15 in the ones column. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, what we're going to use is extra characters. Well, we're going to use letters to fill in. This means 10 ones, 11 ones, 12 ones, 13 ones, 14 ones, 15 ones, 1, 16, and 0 ones, okay? Because in base 16, we have the ones place, the 16s place, then the 16 times 16s place, which is the 256 place, and so on. So you can look at this table right now, or you can pause, or you can watch it in the background when I show you my little hexadecimal base 16 odometer that I made. Basically, it's like an odometer in a crazy car where the numbers just go up, and usually when you get to 9, this would go to a 1. That's how we count in base 10. But since this counts in hexadecimal, notice 8, 9, 10 ones, 11 ones, 12 ones, that's C, 13 ones, 14 ones, 15 ones. Then we go to 10, which means 116 and 0 ones, okay? And then we count again, 11, 12, this is in hexadecimal, 13, 14. So this is actually more than 15. If we counted how many miles we had gone, it would be more than 15. In fact, it would be 16 plus 5, because this is the 16's place. This is the 1's place, 16's place, 256's place, all right? This would be 16 plus 5, 21 miles, going. Oh, 1A, how much is that? Well, that's 16, and this is A is 10 ones. So this would be 16 plus 10, 26 miles for us, but only 1A for people driving this hex car. Oh, and here comes 1F. 1F plus 1 is 20 in hex, all right? And so on, and then this would go on and on if we kept going and going and going and going and going and going and going. We'd eventually get to, this thing would be spinning like mad, FF, which would be 255. You can do the math, but it's 15 times 16 plus 15. So then FF plus 1 is 100, or 256.
Okay, I'm sure you can all rush out and make your own little hexadecimal odometer and go spinning it around. This concept is a little bit hard to get your head around. You really need to kind of understand it, though, to use the hex system. But you don't really have to completely understand it or be able to write or add or subtract quickly in hex or anything like that. Please consider re-watching that video to go over it some more, and we'll keep on going here. So that's how hex works, all right? There are other color formats. Your text mentions them. You should understand them. We're not going to probably use them. HSL, interesting. You can try it. RGBA, actually, you will use this. You're going to use this in the Color 1 exercise, which is in this week. HSLA is another newer choice, and there'll probably be newer ones in the future, too. What is the A in RGBA or in HSLA? A is opacity. So we have red, we got green, we got blue. What about opacity? Opacity is the other side of transparency. Opacity means how solid something is. Transparency is how unsolid it is, right? So usually an opacity at 1, at a scale of 0 to 1, is fully opaque, which means it's not transparent at all, and 0 means it is transparent. All right. So the A stuff, I think, is pretty well understood by most all relatively new browsers. There were some older browsers, especially Internet Explorer. Older Internet Explorer had all kinds of problems. They didn't understand the A stuff, but I think we're past that now. Okay, picking colors. That's one thing about how color works, right? But why do you choose certain colors? Well, you should be thinking through this and thinking about your resume, like what colors say something about you. Honestly, that's a personal choice, but depending on the color of the kind of website you're designing in the future sometime, maybe it's like a magazine or something, or maybe it's a business or something, then these decisions you make about why you pick certain colors would come from a different place, not just a personal decision, right? But do realize that colors do carry different kinds of meaning: emotional meaning, cultural meaning, institutional meaning, and you should at least be familiar with that idea. For instance, emotional meaning: red is aggressive, blue is calming, purple is romantic. That idea, right? There's a lot more to it than that. Let's make this bigger. And frankly, these are extremely simplistic. Red. Red is aggressive, fire, blood, and so on. Well, but there's a lot of reds. What about pink? Love, friendship. What about a reddish brown? Harvest and fall. So you think about the emotional meanings of color. Orange has certain emotional meanings, but there's a big difference between a gold color and maybe a dark orange. Yellow, maybe sunshine, or maybe it's dull and dingy and it's like decay and sickness, right? So green, it could be peace, like olive green, or it could be emotional healing and protection, or it might be ambition and greed. On and on. So you should have the idea for a future quiz of what might be an example of a emotional meaning of some color. But these are very subjective, of course. What are the cultural and ethnic meanings of color? If your website is targeting a particular cultural or ethnic group, let's say maybe you're making a website for people in some subcultural group in India that's going to appeal to them or something. Well, you have to know what colors mean things then there, because every cultural and ethnic group has certain meanings and feelings attached to certain colors too. So again, although this is extremely simplified, this idea that what does red mean in different cultures? In Russia, it might mean one thing, but maybe in some Native American cultures, it might mean something else. Pink might mean trust in Korea. Frankly, there's a lot of cultures in Korea, so this is extremely simplified. But you get the idea that maybe orange in Ireland, it has one religious meaning, but maybe in Netherlands, it means something else, and so on. So there's a lot to this. If nothing else, if you were making something that wasn't just a general purpose website that is available that you want to attract everybody to, if you're going to, if you want to make sure you know what the ethnic and cultural meanings of certain colors you would choose. You wouldn't want to pick a color that was going to offend some people. And then institutional meanings. So if you were going to make a website for Cardinal Sports, can you imagine which would be a dominant color? Probably red. Sports teams have obvious colors associated with them, right? So do businesses, like maybe for UPS, the package delivery people. Well, it's brown. That's their uniform. That's their color of their trucks, and so on. So the website would have that too. And maybe some whole business sectors, like the hospital sector. You go look at a lot of medical and hospital websites. There's a lot of kind of a light blues and greens. They're kind of like clean looking colors. They want things to be clean and calming, right? So different institutions and business sectors and organizations have colors that have an institutional meaning for them. So we consider all these things when we think about colors. We choose colors. Also, so what have people done there? Well, you can go out and look at a lot of websites. Of course, the most famous website in the world, most popular website in the world, Google, uses very little color at all, unless they have a doodle thing going on. But otherwise, there's very little color used. Very carefully used color. And I will say that there's a lot of websites that use a lot of heavy, aggressive colors. So, for instance, this is a gaming website. They use dark blues, reds, blacks, so on. Lots of heavy colors. And there's a lot of websites that use a lot of minimalist kind of colors. Actually, this website, Cupcakes and Cashmere, has gotten a little bit more aggressive in their color in the last couple of seasons. But I do notice that most of their blog area is just very light with this pinkish color and then off-white background and off-black text. And it just goes on like that, very light. All right. So these carry different feelings and meanings and so on, and they're carefully put together. You should also be looking at what are the trends. What websites have won awards for their color choices, their color schemes? What are the trends in color for this season or that next season? And in fact, I've given you a color. I have a color trend link. No, that's not the one I wanted. Yeah, those are color tools and sorry. Oh yeah, top color trends for 2021. All right, they make an interesting argument that the trends that were starting to happen in 2000 were one way. They were actually very bright colors and everything, right? And some of those trends have continued, but when 2020 went crazy, people all of a sudden wanted a lot more calming and more organic kind of colors. So there's a lot of variety now in what are the color trends. But super saturated, juicy colors were one of the trends that started last year, and maybe they're going to continue for some things. But for a lot of things, we see human skin tones are very important, and skin tone light colors are being used, right? And harmonious, calming colors. I think it's because things have been so wild and crazy. And maybe expressive colors, right? Monochrome +1. That's definitely been a trend over the last year or two. It's been building this idea of we use focus on one color and everything else is mostly black. Parts of one color like red and gray together. Worn and faded looking things is very common. And organically shaped color backgrounds and things. Not just sharp edges, but more smooth things. The color of the year supposedly is gray for 2021. So there you go. Okay, so we can look at trends, and if you do a search for top web color trends for whatever, you'll get a bunch of things to look at. So these are all things we think about when we choose colors. So we'll talk about the structure of color itself when we're choosing color. When we're choosing color, we typically use a color wheel, right? Which shows the hues of different colors. Hue is what we generally think of as color. When you think about red, green, blue, and so on, you think of that's the hue. It's the color that's in color. In online color pickers, we use hue, but we also use saturation and value. Sometimes saturation is called chroma. Sometimes value is called lightness or darkness. So hue is the underlying color. The saturation is how intense it is, how much color is in it. And value is how much white or black is in it, okay? And this is a website about that in more detail. You can go into what is hue versus what is saturation, which is called chroma, how intense the color is, or how much white and black is in the color, these examples. Okay. Also, we use some other terms. They vary by different ways of describing the color scheme, but we might talk about things being a mono or monochromatic color schemes that are based on a single color. without a whole lot of variation in them. There might be analogic or analogous. So they use adjacent. Sometimes people call it adjacent hues. So in other words, we look at the color wheel. We don't just look at one color. We look at the colors either side of it. We put those together. Complementary means colors that are opposite side of the color wheel. Triadic or tetradic, and then other words are sometimes used for 3 or 4 groups of color that are positioned geometrically on the color wheel and therefore kind of go together. A little more about that. So it's about color theory, right? Monochromatic is just a single point in the color wheel, but there's things within that like lighter, darker, more saturated, less saturated. Analogous, analogical is related colors are put in there too. Complementary is that are opposite sides of the color wheel. Those colors go together. We have complementary, or they call them different ways that are split, right? And triad is 3 equally positioned. Tetrad is really just taking the complementary one and not splitting it, but putting double complementary in there. And then there's color theory. Color theory in general, you have a general idea about that as you start to approach using a color scheme designing tool, as we will. Okay. And some good online color pickers. So you're going to be choosing colors, making color schemes that eventually will probably turn into a color scheme of some kind for your resume. You could read all about a whole bunch of color scheme picking software out there that's free. And I think I have too many tabs open, but it's struggling. It's going to cut through. This is examples of lots of them. Adobe Color. I'm going to show you that one. And then I'm also going to show you Paladin. Actually, I think it's I like the old version of Paladin, which I'll show you. So I recommend you look at Cooler and then look at Color Scheme Designer, probably this old version of Color Scheme Designer, which I think is a little bit easier. But you can look at the new one too. So Cooler, which is by Adobe, which is now called Adobe Color. My link is a little old, but it goes to the same place. What you do here is you choose first, I want monochromatic, triad, analogous, complementary. If I choose complementary colors, now I can take these wheels, I can move them around, look and see how the colors change. I can change how much variation there is in that color. I can change these positions. These color wheels take a little while to get used to. Once you find a group of colors you like, and you say, oh, those are the colors I want to use on my website, then you can, of course, you can export it and you can learn more about this website, or you can actually just go down here and look at them, look at these hashtag codes, write them down and use them. What I like to use, though, as I said, is Color Scheme Designer. This is the older version of Color Scheme Designer. If you go to the modern one, it looks like this, which is similar, but I think there's some problems with this as far as the examples that don't quite work as well. So that's why I'm going to the 3.5. Okay. Yes, you have to look at the dumb ads, I'm afraid, but that's how it goes. Choose a general style. Let's start with complementary. Okay. Complementary has some variety in it, but not crazy variety like Tetrad. It's got a lot of variety in it. It gets a little bit chaotic. Let's say complementary. So first I can just spin this wheel around and see complementary colors that go together and how they're displayed there, right? Okay. Let's say I like something like that, greens and purples maybe? I don't know. But I want more than that. I don't want it just to be those greens and purples. I could adjust the scheme. I could actually make them a little bit duller maybe, a little bit lighter maybe. The saturation I'm changing, saturation and brightness. And I could actually change how much black is in them. I could add that too. I could work with these buttons here. Okay. And eventually I could go back here and I could keep going back to my hues if I want to change it based on that some more. It would give me a list of the colors I've come up with, or I could just hover over them here. But I also like to see, you might like to imagine how would those look on a website, for instance. If I click on this light page example, here it shows me those colors. If I click in here, it would switch the colors out often. It doesn't seem to want to do the switching right now. Okay, so it would show me I could use these colors in this way maybe. I could color links like that maybe. Okay, or I could try a dark page example. Okay, dark page example. takes those and uses them dark. I'm not suggesting you actually use them exactly this way, but just let you look at them with some text and so on, and then you could close this guy up and continue along and try some more. Eventually, you would get to come up with a color scheme, a group of colors that work together. Okay, more about CSS and color. Yes, this is taking a long time. It'll be done soon, though, hopefully. Remember, it's just color and a value. There's also something called background color and a value, and then its opacity can be written separately. Although with RGBA, it's part of it. RGBA, it goes into the code itself, right? Color is foreground color, text, and borders. Background color fills the canvas behind, and opacity 0 to 1 affects foreground and background colors. And I don't know about this having to use special provisions for Internet Explorer any longer. It's probably in the past now. Selector types, there's a lot about selector types in the color chapter. Descendant selectors you should have already seen. Remember, there's no comma. It means go to the OL and find the LIs within it. ID selectors, we can use them. You can use those as descendant selectors too with something else. Class selectors are dots. And the universal selector, which is an asterisk. Okay, and we're going to come back to this, but so I'll just go through it quickly and tell you links. Boy, I tell you, that's a big topic in color. We're not doing links yet, styling links, but you should generally know links have their own styling rules. We have to keep track of them. They have to be done just in this order. L, V, F, H, A. L means a static link, what it looks like before you click on it. V means visited, what it looks like after it's been clicked on. Focus and hover are really sort of the same thing, what it looks like when you hover over it. And then active means what it looks like at the moment when it's clicked, okay? So this group of things, we set the text decoration, which is the underlining or not, or remove it like I have here. And then we list the links with all these A's. These A colon, A colon, A colon, those are called pseudo classes, which you should read about in your text. This is just a quick overview right now. This is how we do links, which is part of color. How do you remember LVFHA? Here's 2 ways to remember it. Lord Voldemort fights Harry alone, or Lord Vader, former handle Anakin. More pseudoclasses. If you like pseudoclasses, it's a whole big area you can go into. I think that the first line pseudoclass and the first letter pseudoclass might be interesting ones to try using, and there's many more there. Link designs, best practices. Okay, we're really getting deep here now. I'm going to go over this more when we go over links, a link exercise in the future. I'll just have you read through that and think about link design best practices. And background images, again, too much here all at once. We can use background images, and we will do a background image exercise. But please review this page in the presentation for the future. External style sheets, we've already talked about this. How we make a link, right? External style sheets are a major advantage. One document can control many. One CSS file to rule them all. CSS files should only include CSS, no HTML, and we set the language to CSS, or we save it as CSS file. External style sheets connect to HTML. With the link or import method, we will link, which is how the link works right there. Finally, the end. Thanks for sticking with me through all that. And again, we'll probably have more detail in the future about the links section, which I went over very quickly, I know. But it's going to be really important in the future.